Good morning, everyone, or good evening if you're in Cambodia or Southeast Asia, and good afternoon if you're in Europe. Welcome to our special program today, the meanings and importance of the Khmer Zero. We're going to just hold on a few minutes to let a few more people join before we get fully started. Okay, so let me go ahead and start. I'm Eve Zucker. I'm the president of CKS, and I'm delighted to moderate this very special event we have today, which is about the meanings and importance of the Cambodian Zero, the Khmer Zero. And we have with us today some very special guests that I will introduce more fully in a moment, but just briefly, we have with us today Miriam and Deborah Aczel from the Aczel Foundation. And we also have with us today Dr. Ia Durit, who is an archaeologist and one of the real specialists on Cambodian antiquities. And so today what we're going to be talking about is this ancient inscription of the number zero that appears very early on in Cambodian history, and in fact is said to be the earliest known zero in the world. The mathematician, Dr. Amir Aczel, sort of rediscovered this, found this while he was on his quest to locate the origin of numbers in the world. And we will be talking today about the significance of this zero, of this inscription. And also we will be contextualizing it within Cambodian history and also within the history of numbers. So before we get started further, I just want to go over some housekeeping with everyone here. Our program today lasts an hour and a half. And so the first hour we're going to spend with presentations from both Dr. Ia Durit and also from Dr. Miriam Aczel and Deborah Aczel. And after that, we will turn it over to the Q&A section when you all have a chance to ask questions of our panelists. And so the way that's going to work is that if you are on Zoom, I ask that you put your questions into the Q&A box. However, if you are on Facebook, if you're watching this from Facebook Live, it would be good if you just put the questions in the chat, and we will do our best to answer those then. So the other thing you need to know is that this event is being recorded, and that this webinar will be available later on our website and also in our library. So if you're coming on late and you want to see the beginning, or you want to share it with someone later, then you'll have an opportunity to do that. So let me move now to the introductions here. Actually, I think it would be nice if everybody turned their camera on while I introduce you all, so everybody can see who I'm talking about. There you guys are. That's great. Okay, so there you all are. So just so everybody in the audience knows, this webinar is being brought to you from several corners of the world. We have Ia Durit, who's in Prei here. We have our team at CKS, who's operating the show, coming to you from Phnom Penh. I'm in Connecticut, and Deborah and Miriam are in Paris. So I think we're spanning a fair amount of the globe here. So let me start by introducing Dr. Ia Durit. So Dr. Ia Durit is the director of the Department of Conservation and Archaeology at the National Authority for Prei. He earned his master's degree from Kyoto University in 2000 and his doctoral degree from the Osaka Ohani University in Japan in 2010. For 21 years, he has worked at Apsara National Authority and taught courses in history and ceramics at the Royal University of Fine Arts and Panyasastra University. He has coordinated a spectrum of diverse projects between Apsara National Authority and numerous international teams. Dr. Ia's research focuses mostly on Khmer stoneware ceramics during the Angkor period from the 9th to the 15th centuries. He has excavated more than 10 stoneware kilns, and in 2015, he took over all management of ceramics excavated from the Angkor area. He was a Nalanda Sriwijaya Center Senior Visiting Fellow in Singapore in 2014 to 2015. And in 2018, he was a visiting scholar at Cornell University, and he has also given lectures at several universities in the United States, including Yale University, the University of Wisconsin, Madison, and Northern Illinois University. So welcome, Dr. Ia Durit. I now would like to introduce Deborah and Miriam Aczel, starting with Deborah. Deborah is the co-founder and current co-director of the Amir Aczel Foundation for Research and Education in Science and Mathematics, which supports projects in Cambodia. The foundation is an outgrowth of the work of her late husband, mathematician Dr. Amir Aczel, on the origins of zero. As part of her work with the foundation, she, along with Dr. Miriam Aczel, co-organized a conference at zero's place in the history of mathematics in Cambodia with the Royal University of Phnom Penh, and recently co-sponsored a workshop on zero at the Zero Project at Vrije Universiteit in the Netherlands. Deborah has over 45 years in educational program management and served as program manager in the educational program interdisciplinary environmental program, MIT Terrascope program, and MIT Integrated Studies program, which combines science, mathematics, and humanities with experimental learning for first-year undergraduates. She holds a BA in English from Pitzer College and a master's in management from Brandeis University. So, and now I'd like to introduce Dr. Miriam Aczel. Miriam is the co-founder and co-director of the Amir Aczel Foundation and is a postdoctoral scholar at the California Institute for Energy Environment at UC Berkeley, working on the Oakland Eco-Block Community Renewable Energy Microgrid. She is currently an honorary research associate at the Imperial College at London Center for Environmental Policy. Miriam holds a PhD and an MSc in environmental technology from Imperial College London. She has been a visiting research at the Environmental Law Institute in Washington, DC, and Tsinghua University in Beijing. She currently serves on the editorial board of the Journal of Science Policy and Governance, and is director of scientific communications for Leaders in Energy, an environmental organization that is based in Washington, DC. So welcome everyone to our program. We are thrilled to have you all here with us today. And we are also very happy for our audience to be here as well. Welcome to all of you. So what we're going to do today is we're going to start with a brief introduction from Miriam and Deborah Aczel, a little bit about their foundation. And then after that, we will be turning it over to Ia Durit, who will be able to give us some of the background of where this zero sits, where this inscription comes from, set within Cambodian history. After that, we'll be going back to Miriam and Deborah, who will talk a little bit more about the meanings and significance of zero and also the work of the late Dr. Amir Aczel. So Miriam and Deborah, would you like to begin?
Thank you so much.
Yes.
It's really a great pleasure and great honor to be here with you all today and speak about a project and work that is very close to our hearts. Our foundation is an outgrowth of Amir Aczel's interest in Cambodia and the work that he had done to rediscover what arguably is the oldest representation of zero ever known. Amir was a mathematician, but believed that mathematics should be studied and understood in its historical and social and philosophical context. And in that sense, zero was very important to him. So the immediate outgrowth of his work was a book called Finding Zero that details his quest to rediscover the ancient stone containing the zero. In our talk, we'll tell you a bit about how that was discovered and why this was such an incredibly significant discovery. And we also want to leave the audience with the idea that Amir liked mysteries, and there's still many, many mysteries around zero in Cambodia. There's much work that still needs to be done to understand more completely the story.
Great, thank you for that introduction. It's very, very helpful. So let's turn it over now to Rit here. So Dr. Ia, would you like to tell us a little bit about the history of this inscription and how it's situated within Cambodian history?
Thank you very much. Thank you all the audience who participated in this webinar today. So I would like to share the screen to show my presentation. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the meaning and importance of the Khmer Zero from the Khmer inscription, but not the meaning of the importance of Khmer Zero, but I just only present about the history of study of the Khmer inscription. For me, I'm not really an epigraphy. Actually, I'm the archaeology who do research on Khmer ceramic and Khmer history. So the Khmer inscription were written on the stone wall, pillar, door jamb, stele, of monument, and utensil. Moreover, the inscription were also written on metal objects, and sometimes we also found on the ceramics. The inscription tells us about the date of construction of monument, even name of ruler or king, name of servant at monuments, who serve at monument, material used at the monument, measurement and scale, etc. So up to date, there are 1,581 inscriptions were documented based on information from Mr. Hun Chun Teng, who is the Khmer epigrapher. But before explain you about how the Khmer ceramic was studied, I would like to draw your attention to the age of exploration or discovery in Europe from 15th to 17th century. Because from that time, the European country was very flourished and could make big ships that can travel long distance to United States, to Asia, to Southeast Asian country, and to many places in the world. So the age of exploration is when the European began exploring the world by sea in search of new trading routes, wealth, technology, and knowledge. So the impact of the age exploration would permanently alter the world and transform geography into a modern science it is today. So the Portugal led the way in the voyage of the exploration. So the first recorded European reached Malacca and Southeast Asia is Admiral Diogo Lopez the Sekera that arrived the Malacca in 1509. At the time, the Malacca was very well known of an international trade port in Southeast Asia from approximately 1511 to 1641 AD. The Portugal and the Spain also recorded about Cambodia from 15th century. So this is the first contact between Cambodia with the Westerner. So what they record about Cambodia in 16th century? So the first Europe wrote about Cambodia is Phnom Penh. He wrote between 1512 to 15. The title of the book is Sumer Orient Tal. He noted that the king liked the war and did not listen to others. However, this writing based on only the rumor. Later, Patrick, the Portuguese who come to spread out the Christianity at Long Bay, capital of Cambodia in 1556, noted that the Khmer respect the kings and the monk very much. So he went back after falling to spread the Christianity in Cambodia. So about the year 1550-51, a Khmer king found a temple in jungle while capturing the elephant. But later, according to other sources, the temple was found when the preparation to fight with Thai armies. The king stayed near a river, probably near Siem Reap River, and 5,000 to 6,000 people cleared the forest. A few days, and then the king visited the temple with very large scale. So this is your Go du Koto. And this is the map of the exploration period that I got from internet. So this is how people travel from Europe to other places in the world. So the Angkor was explored by the European in 19th century. So Angkor was very well known in Europe after a report by Henri Moreau, who published in 1863. He was a French journalist, a naturalist on expedition with the British Royal Geographic Society, and was the first Westerner to publicly acclaim the wonder of Angkor. So after that, a German ethnologist, Adolf Bastian, was the first attempt to understand Angkor from the scientific point of view, associating the monument with the Indian architectural models. The scientific interests were to heighten the political value of Angkor. So the Khmer inscription was wrapped and translated in the late 19th century. So during the 1880s, Khmer statuary of art were exported to France for displaying at museum, and the wrapping of inscription were also sent to Europe for studying. So in 1880s, the first translation of Cambodian Sanskrit inscription were published. A monumental 3-volume study of the Cambodia were published by Agent Aimonier. So he gave the first translation of Old Khmer and Sanskrit inscription. So these laid the foundation of the chronological interpretation of ancient Khmer civilization. So after that, the École Française Extrême Orient, FEO, was created in 1899 for studying the Khmer inscription. And the first director of the FAO, of course, is specialized in Sanskrit and Khmer epigraphy. So the Khmer inscription was studied very advanced by the Cœdès. So in 1937, he published the Inscription of Cambodia, volume 1, study and translate by École Française Extrême Orient, Hanoi. Then 1942, volume 2, published in Hanoi. Then 1951, volume 3 in Paris. 1952, 53, 54, volume 4, 5, and 6 in Paris, and 1964, volume 7 in Paris, and finally 1966, volume 8 in Paris. So Cœdès, he published a lot of inscription. So from K1, K means the Khmer inscription, from the Khmer inscription number 1 to 1005. So more than 1000 inscription was studied and published by Cœdès. And then close up, continue from K106, K1006 to K1050. And then the inscription also was studied by Cambodian, Madame Rouge. In 1989, he published the New Inscription of Cambodia, volume 1, translated and studied by the École Française Extrême Orient in Paris. And 2001, volume 2 and 3 by the École Française Extrême Orient, Paris, and 2011, volume 4, with the help from Gregory Mickalang. And also in 1992, she published the Old Khmer Dictionary and translated in French and English. So this is the list of inscription that studied and translated by Cœdès. As you can see here, the K means Khmer inscription, and below in number 1. And this is the list. So the pays means a province, country or province from Vietnam in An Giang, because some inscription were also found in Vietnam, Thai, and Laos. That is the original of the inscription and situation, actual situation, type of inscription, detail, language, Khmer or Sanskrit, and date by Chaka, and the wrapping by FAO and by BNF. So this is a list of inscription that published by by Cœdès from number 1 to 1005. So this is all the list, but the important is the K127. You can see in the list K127 27 from Cœdès province in Cambodia, from Sambo district, from Trepang Prei. So this inscription dated by Cœdès is 605 Chaka. But later, the inscription was revised by Dominic Suti in 2008, that published in Saksacha. So it date 604. 604, yeah. So this is the origin of inscription from Trepang Prei Temple, Sambo district, Cœdès province. It was translated by Cœdès in 1931 and revisited by Amir Aczel in Angkor Conservation Office in Siem Reap, and he studied and published a book about the finding zero. So the number 0 was found in the inscription 604, 605, but actually 604. And calculate with AD, it's 682. So the number 0 is very important within the history and mathematics. I think the two speakers, Miriam and Deborah, will explain more about the significance and the meaning of the Khmer zero. So this is the K127 from the inscription. So as you can see in the red cycle inscription. Oh, thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Derek. That was very interesting, and it's interesting to see the that particular inscription set within the context of all the inscriptions that were translated. It was an incredible amount of work that was done, clearly, and it's nice that it was very interesting also that you identified this more recent discovery that actually it's being dated now a year earlier than before, which is remarkable. I'm wondering a little bit, which we can wait till maybe the Q&A period, of whether there was some kind of difference in technique involved in determining that date versus the original date. But before we do that, let's turn it over now to Miriam and Deborah and hear a little bit more specifically about zero and its significance.
Okay, are you able to see our screen okay? Great, okay. So first, thank you so much to the organizers and to all of you for joining us here. It's a real honor and a pleasure to be here. We're just delighted to be with you today. Our purpose today is, we hope, to excite you with a story of what might be the oldest zero ever found. And so, as mentioned, labeled K127 and found in Cambodia. My father, Amir Aczel, was really fascinated with the history of mathematics, and his final book, Finding Zero, tells the story of his kind of adventure, his search for the origins of zero. And this was a quest that took him to India, Thailand, Vietnam, Laos, and then finally to Cambodia. So here there's the cover of a book and a photo of my dad. The picture here is of my dad as an Indiana Jones character, and it's a graphic story from Brazil. And we think this is really cool because mathematics, we think, is a great adventure story. And this image from a magazine in Brazil captures my dad the way he liked to see himself, pursuing a really exciting mathematical story. And his book has been translated into Khmer as a story. It's now available, Finding Zero in Khmer. So So now we're going to talk a little bit about the search in India. So Amir's goals was to discover the origins of the numeral 0, and he believed that mathematics held the key to knowledge. And I think of all the numbers, he believed that 0 was the most exciting and the most perfect. So his quest was really to learn about what he could learn about how humans developed and spread this idea of 0, and perhaps what cultures gave rise to this concept of 0. So where did it begin, and how is it spread? So who invented 0? This shows there are great contributions to 0, but 0 as we know and use it came from elsewhere. So the Babylonians had a base 60 system and eventually used a glyph to mark the absence of a number for clarity. And there was no indication that they used 0 in the mathematical sense. And the Greeks were philosophically opposed to identifying 0 as a number, so nothing can't have an identity. And letters were used to stand for numbers. The Romans also followed the Greek system, and the Mayans used a glyph in the calendar system to reset time sequences to 0. And there was no evidence that this is transmitted beyond Central Americas. But the development of a true 0 as a placeholding mark and for use mathematically is a great and arguably philosophical leap in understanding of abstract thinking. So here's some examples of early number systems. Amir first went to India. He went to meet a mathematician that he had met at a conference in Australia who had told him, you have to set the record straight, overturn the colonial bigotry that says that mathematical origins are in the West. The source of all mathematics is here in the East. So he went to Khajuraho and he spoke to experts on Jainism, and he was searching for a mysterious magic square inscribed in a Jain temple that a Japanese mathematician had told him about. And then he went to Gwalior to see the Sanskrit inscription that was the oldest definitively dated at the time, dated to 876 CE. And he knew about a manuscript that was held in Oxford at the Bodleian Library, the Bakhshali manuscript, and he had seen it at Oxford, but at the time the Bodleian had not yet allowed it to be carbon dated.
I think Amir was interested in physical proof, tangible evidence of how numbers developed. And in that sense, he wanted to see the environments that produced numbers, the landscape, the culture, the temples, the sculptures, and meet the people who inherited multiple religious and philosophical traditions. He spent a good deal of time talking to monks in Eastern countries to understand how they viewed nothingness and whether they felt that there was a connection between a mathematical 0 and 0 or nothingness in the philosophical sense. Now, Admire Leclerc was a French colonial officer who was interested in archaeology, and this goes back to 1891. He found the inscriptions in the ruin of the temple Trepang Prei at Sambor Mekong. And then this was the inscription that Georges Cœdès, who we just heard about, a couple of decades later, labeled K127. There were two inscriptions actually that were found in the series of in that particular location, and K127 and K128 that appear in his famous catalog of inscriptions.
So the story of Georges Cœdès is really remarkable. He first became interested in decoding ancient transcriptions by viewing them in the Musée du Louvre. And then he formally studied Sanskrit and ancient Khmer, and he received his doctorate at the École pratique des hautes études, and he got a job at the École française d'Extrême-Orient, originally in Hanoi. And then he went on to become a leading archaeologist, a linguist, and a historian in Khmer studies. So Cœdès' research and his contribution to what we now know about Angkor and pre-Angkor civilization is really, really important. So as an example, he wrote a book on Angkor Wat that's still considered the most comprehensive study done to date. And he cataloged and translated about 1,000 transcriptions, as we heard from Dr. Dorit, that are included in this massive 8-volume work. And in fact, his name is still prominent in displays at the National Museum of Cambodia in Phnom Penh. And then among scholars in the 1920s and 30s, numbers were commonly thought to have originated in the West, in Arabia or Greece or both, and then later passed through trade routes to India after. But Cœdès' extensive research and his study of Eastern civilizations had convinced him that no, numerals in fact came from India, or what he called an Indianized civilization. So meaning other areas heavily influenced in culture, religion, and philosophy by India before they appeared in the Middle Ages in the West. And he thought that he could prove this definitively if he could find an inscription with a zero that predated Gwalior. GRK at the time was a well-respected scholar who was in fact the first to do research on the Bakhshali manuscript. And he was concluding based on linguistic evidence that it was no earlier than perhaps the 9th or 10th century. He knew India well, and he had studied Sanskrit documents that he called unreliable because he felt that these could either be copies or be falsified or have other problems. And he very strongly supported this view that numbers come from the West and certainly not India. And Cœdès was determined to prove him wrong once and for all. And he thought that documents wouldn't be enough because Kay didn't trust them. So he needed an irrefutable stone inscription. And so as Cœdès began translating K127 from Old Khmer, he was stunned to realize that it had a date with a zero that was much further than the date and was the proof that he was looking for. So it dates to 605, and now we just learned really 604 of the Chaka era, or 683. So this is, a full 2 centuries earlier than Gwalior zero, and here was his proof.
So the map on the left, if you can see where K127 and K128 are marked in sort of the upper left quadrant, that's the location where the inscription with the oldest zero was found. And the image on the right is a recent expedition that went to this area to see what might still be there. And the way this site was described by Leclerc, even when he originally found the inscription, it wasn't that different. There were stones and not much else. So it's not clear what this particular temple looked like. And here we have the stone, the inscription on the left. The image on the left is actually from an original cataloging of the image, and this was the image that Amir was using when he eventually searched for and rediscovered the missing stele in Angkor conservation. And if you see the image on the right half of the slide, the dot in the center represents zero. Now there's the image on the far right also shows a representation of zero, and it has now become a small circle that looks very similar to what we now use mathematically as a zero. Now, the finding is incredibly important for the history of mathematics because it proved definitively that the origin of zero is Eastern, that it came to the West from the East and not the other way around. And you see on the timeline, this brief timeline, where the discovery of the Khmer zero fits. And now Amir knew that when the Khmer Rouge took over political power in 1975, they declared year zero, signaling a new beginning to Cambodian history and an erasure of all previous Cambodian history. So as he began trying to find the stone Cœdès had labeled K127, he learned that it had disappeared. It had been in the National Museum, but was no longer there and possibly had been destroyed. Now, he viewed his rediscovery of it as collaboration of many people in Cambodia who believed that this was important work and helped him. Eventually, through a friend of a friend who had another acquaintance who knew somebody, he was able to contact somebody located at the Angkor Conservation in Siem Reap, who that's kind of a storehouse for antiquities, many of them broken or damaged. And the director said that actually the stele had been brought there in 1969, but it was not clear if it was still there. It wasn't in their recent cataloging. To look further, he needed permission from the Ministry of Culture, specifically His Excellency Habtush, former director of the National Museum in Phnom Penh and now in charge of cultural artifacts in Cambodia. Without permission, he went back. The director opened the door to a shed, a huge storage facility with Buddha heads and other parts of ancient statues lined up in rows and rows of stones with inscriptions. And using the image, the old image from the book that he had, that had an outline of what the stone looked like, he began searching through the rows, and within minutes, he found what he was looking for. There it was. And aside from a broken section at the right side, the stone was in amazingly good condition, and the date containing the 0 was absolutely legible. So there's Amir in Angkor Conservation, and you see the pieces of stones lying on the floor, and Buddha heads and other items stored in this facility.
So why is this so important? Why is the Khmer 0 so important? So, it's the oldest previous 0 that was found in this inscription in Gwalior, in what's now Pakistan, and by the date could have been brought by Arab traders. And so because of this discovery, before this discovery, others argued that Arab traders had brought the 0 to India and other Indianized civilization. But here was concrete proof that this date was before Arab traders arrived in India. So this is why it definitively proves the Eastern origin of the 0. And importantly, it counters the Western bias that the invention of numbers and 0 had to come to Greece from the Western world. And we see that George Cœdès was right. And I think my father believed that in the story and its importance to mathematics in Cambodia. And because of this, we set up the foundation after he passed away in 2015 to continue this really important work in Cambodia in his name. And we've since seen K127 rescued from Angkor Conservation Storehouse and installed as it should be for all to see in the National Museum in Phnom Penh. So here's some photos of celebration of the unveiling of K127 at the National Museum. And with the support from Cambodia's Ministry of Culture and Education and His Excellency Habtush, along with the Royal University of Phnom Penh and the Department of Mathematics, we were able to run a conference that brought together mathematicians and historians of math from all over the world, from India, Australia, from France, from Canada, the United States, to share ideas with Cambodians. And we were thrilled to have 500 first-year Cambodian students from the Royal University of Phnom Penh in attendance. And it was really quite thrilling for us to see so many young Cambodian math students attend our opening session and to see just how strongly the event was supported by the university and the ministries and how excited people were about this discovery.
And here's an image of the symposium in Phnom Penh at the Royal University. And so what we want to encourage and we want to emphasize is the need for further research. Are there other even older 0s? There's a lot of discussion about the Bakhchali manuscript, and some have argued it to be older, but there are also questions about how it was carbon dated. The Bakhchali is actually, it's on birch bark. It's fragile. It's at the Bodleian Library at Oxford. They've carbon dated one of the sheets of birch bark, but nothing containing actual text. So yes, the birch bark is older than K127, but it's not clear, and experts doubt that it is really and truly older until the library allows further carbon dating. So how did the zero get to Cambodia? Is there something uniquely Khmer about this contribution? How does it relate to culture, to what came before, to what came after? How did it lead to later engineering feats such as Angkor Wat? There's a project called Zero Origin India that we've been working a bit with. They're looking at the origins of zero. They've been focused on India, but also elsewhere. They want to know more about Cambodia's contributions. And so we're hoping that we can encourage interest at a lot of different levels, because this, we think, is an important topic to Cambodia and also to mathematics. And here is just a list of some references that might be of interest, and we can certainly share our slides with anybody who might want to know a bit more. And finally, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Miriam and Deborah. That was extremely interesting. I just we're going to open it in just a minute to questions from the audience. But first, I just would like to ask a few questions myself, and I'm actually going to bring in also a question that did come in from the audience. And so these first questions, I'm going to direct towards Dorit. Dorit, I mentioned at the end of your talk, I was curious to know a little more about whether there was any difference in technique used to date the epigraphic inscription that changed that year to a year earlier. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about that, but also there was a question from the audience that was asking exactly what is an epigraphist? What does an epigraphist do? So if you'd like to take those questions, that would be great. I think you might be muted.
So thank you very much for your question. Actually, the number changed from 605 to 604 is based on the reading by the epigraphy, especially Dr. Dominic Sutif. He is a Khmer epigraphy, so he can read the number. Moreover, there are also Cambodian, as I wrote his name on the slide, Mr. Chun Teng. He also can read the number, the old number of Khmer inscription. So all of them agree to change from 605 to 604. Yeah, and epigraphists study about the inscription, how to read and translate the old inscription. Actually, the inscription, there are two languages, Sanskrit and Khmer inscription. But later, there are also Bali inscription. Yeah, so this is the answer to the question.
Thanks, Dorit. And there's another question that came in that just asked for a little more explanation about what the 604 year is. It's asking whether it's Christian numbering or Buddhist. I'd say it's Christian, the year 604. But if you'd like to say a little more about that.
Okay. So the 604 read in the inscription is 604 Chaka. Chaka is the Cambodian era at the time, the Cambodian epoch at the time that used Chaka. And if we convert to a Christian number, so we have to plus 78. So 78 plus 604, so 682 AD.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I corrected. So, there's also a question still connected with this. This is a topic of interest. So from that date, there's a question of whether there was any Cambodian zero before that inscription.
So far, we don't have any information about the early zero before that date.
Okay, great. So, okay, so I'd like to turn for a moment to Miriam and Deborah. There's a question relating to the resource list again, but while you're bringing that up, perhaps I'd like to ask you a slightly different question, which is has to do with the meanings of zero itself. In Amir's book, he goes to great lengths actually to travel to Laos and meet with various monks and Buddhist specialists in different places to try to learn more about the meanings of zero as sort of like, which you mentioned in your talk, as a philosophical concept, this idea of nothingness and any connection to religion and Buddhism and so forth. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that.
Yes. Interestingly, Amir wrote another book before his interest in the Cambodian zero that looked at the other extreme. He looked at the mathematical concept of infinity, and he tried to look to find out what the philosophical roots and not only the philosophical roots, but also the psychological impacts of something as profound as infinity. So the idea that mathematics comes from something, mathematical concepts don't just denote a date or a way of representing a number of oxen or a number of slaves in a list on a stele, I think was really, really important to him. Now, we participated recently in a series of talks as part of this organization, Zero Origin India, and some of the speakers were Buddha or specialists in Buddhism and specialists in philosophy who were making the case that likely the concept, unlike the Greeks who felt that zero could not be represented, zero and nothingness was a very strong concept in Eastern religions, and therefore that may have led to its its representation. Is there proof of that? Not as far as we know. It's speculation.
Okay, great. Thank you. I think it's a very interesting concept. I mean, the connection between mathematics and also philosophy. So
yes, and I might add one more thing. I was with Amir in Laos when he visited young monks, and he asked them a fairly simple question. I'm a mathematician. I'm interested in zero. What do you think as a Buddhist? Do you think that there's a connection? The answer every single time was, why are you even asking the question? Of course, there's a connection. There's a very strong connection.
Interesting. So I have another question for, well, actually, it could go to either any of you, actually. And that has to do with the context of the actual inscription. So there's this zero to denote a particular year on this stone slab. what is the rest of the slab? What does it actually say on that slab? What's it about? Talking about?
Well, I don't have the full translation in front of me, but it's really interesting. It's a bill of sale, and it includes references to slaves. It includes and other numbers, 5 pair of oxen, and sacks of white rice.
Interesting. And it's interesting that they went to the trouble to inscribe this on a stone.
Yes. And it's also interesting, we, our really good friend, Dr. Solon Uk has written a paper about about K127 and a little bit about the background in the Cambodian context. And he pointed out that what's fascinating about the stele is that it's not written in Sanskrit, that it was clearly written. His contention, his belief is that it was written in Old Khmer because it was for people to understand, not just the class that would have understood Sanskrit. And maybe Darit has a comment on that.
Actually there are two languages were written in the old time. The Khmer language were written for not for upper level like Sanskrit. Sanskrit usually used for holy language for describing about the king and about the higher official. Yeah.
Interesting. So I'm just going to send a few questions your way here from the audience. So this one says, thank you for the fascinating presentation. I had read Dr. Aczel's book and I couldn't wait to hear you talk. My question has to do with the Bashali manuscripts, but you have just explained the problems to do with the carbon dating. Basuda Naryaman, distinguished professor, Department of Religion. Sorry if I mispronounced your name, University of Florida.
Yes, well, I might make one comment on the dating of the Bakshali. On the reference list, there's a really significant work by Kim Plofker, and she has done quite a bit of work on numbers in zero, mathematics in India. She's also with a co-author. She wrote a very strong response to the original dating of the Bakshali manuscript that I think is also on the reference list down there at the bottom. A response to the Bodleian Library's radiocarbon dating by Plofker et al. And for any of your audience that might want to know more about what possible problems with the dating technique, that's a good reference.
Yeah, he said, I was thinking about the article by Sarah Gibbons in 2017 in National Geographic on the Bashali. Okay, so there's another question here about whether, was there any, how did Cambodians represent, maybe this is one for you, Dorit, how did they note zero before the inscription?
Excuse me, I don't understand the question very well. What the meaning?
I think they're just asking, like, if before that inscription, was there some other way that zero was, that was there some way of identifying, I guess, the numerical zero, or maybe the concept of nothingness in some kind of symbolic way before this particular inscription?
I do not know well about this because I have no idea about this. Sorry.
Deborah, Miriam, would you like to?
I don't think there has been any, I mean, no, I have not read anything that shows there was a way of identifying zero before this. I know that in other cultures, well, for example, in Babylonia, that did not really have a way to represent zero. They writing a number, they used a space. It's very difficult to understand a number if there's a space that can be little or big or merge into other numbers. But I really don't know. I don't know.
So, okay, so let's oh, here's an interesting question. So if somebody has a question, which is, if zero originated in Cambodia, then how did it, how was it likely that how did it spread to nations, other nations in the world, including, how would that happen? Of course,
Well, that's a nice big research question for somebody. I can speculate a little bit. There were trade routes. There absolutely were. Well, there were traders who came to Cambodia and brought. And so goods were going both directions. So it's likely that and Indianized civilizations spread widely. The Indianized world was very connected. So it's possible that the concepts moved.
Okay, great, thanks. So I'm seeing, let's see, just actually before I ask this question, I'd just like to say, I see that Helen here wanted to ask a question live before, but I'm not really sure how to do that. I'm only seeing questions in the Q&A. Oh, there she is. Okay. Helen, would you like to ask your question? Go ahead.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Eve. And first of all, say hello to Miriam and Deborah. It's lovely to see you again. We had lots of lovely discussions at the conference a few years ago, and also traveling up to Siem Reap. So I'm really pleased to see you again and to make contact. I am living in Phnom Penh, and I'm heavily involved in a program with UNESCO called Memory of the World, which is like World Heritage. Everybody knows World Heritage for cultural and natural sites, but Memory of the World is for documentary heritage. And we promote awareness of documentary heritage and providing access to documentary heritage and preservation. And of course, documents include more than books. They also include manuscripts and maps and inscriptions. So anything that is written down in some way or coded in some way, even smoke signals are considered to be documents. So Morse code. So anyway, I'm involved with the Memory of the World program, and looking around, we also have a register like the World Heritage Register. And one proposal has been that perhaps the K127, the Khmer 0, could be inscribed on the register. And so I've been fascinated, of course, since I think first briefly met with Dr. Amir, but also from the book and the conference and so forth. Recently, I went to Oxford and spent some time there just a couple of months ago, and went to the Bodleian Museum, very anxious to see the Bakhshali manuscript, but once again, it proved difficult for one reason or another. There was COVID, people were on holiday, etc., etc. But I did manage to see one fragment of one leaf, which had been preserved in glass, which was quite fascinating to look at. I wasn't allowed to photograph it, unfortunately, but I certainly gazed at it with wonder for some time of the Bakhshali manuscript. And I think that I'd just like to make a couple of points. One is, I think we have to distinguish between the K127, as we believe at the moment, is the oldest extant example of Xero, but it doesn't necessarily mean it was the first. So we have to be careful about that. We say it's the oldest one we've seen now, but who knows? Next year, tomorrow, another one may be found either in Cambodia or in another place. And it's likely that it was actually used in India, even though we haven't got an older extant copy. And also, I think it's important also to look at that one that was shown on one of the slides there from Bangka in Indonesia. And I think that time period is very close, 605, 608, 604. Very interesting if in Indonesia they were also using something similar. So I think we've got a lot of work to do. And I'm very excited by the idea of perhaps even looking at several together as joint manuscripts of joint inscriptions from that period, showing that the Xero was used in Southeast Asia and South Asia at the time. So I really encourage everything, and I want to stay in close touch with everybody on this. I'm fascinated to hear about the Xero origin India, and I'd like to hear more about that if perhaps somebody could point us in that direction. But thank you very much for the opportunity for this evening. It's great to have this matter discussed at greater length.
Thank you for the comments, Helen. And well, a couple of things. I think that this is a topic that needs a lot of work, and hopefully there will be researchers in Cambodia who think this is compelling and will want to look more into what the roots were that sent Xero as a concept into different locations. I know that in India, we were told that there are many uncatalogued manuscripts. It's possible there are older Xeros. The fact that there were trade routes and Xero likely moved. There's work that I think could excite somebody very, very much to learn more about the transmission of Xero.
Following on that, Deborah, I just have a question. Did Amir ever travel to Sumatra and meet with anyone doing research on that Xero that was on that island there? No, he did not. I should say very much that this project was extremely close to his heart, and he sadly didn't live long enough to continue the work that he would have wanted to do on it. This was by no means a finished project for him. And do you know how much work has been done on that Sumatran Xero?
I don't know. I know that the date is very close. I don't know.
Well, I
It's
have,
it's a good research topic for somebody, isn't it?
yeah, I quite agree with both you and Helen on that, that there's really a tremendous amount of work to be done. And it would be a great multi-sided research project, in fact, to be able to, you know, study the Cambodian Xero and then go to Sumatra and then India. And I think really that's going to take something like that to you know, figure out a little bit more about how this concept and how this denotation of zero spread and was used in these varying contexts. It's really fascinating. And thank you, Helen, also for offering, you know, I think that's a great idea with the UNESCO memory project. It sounds like a very, to me, it seems like it makes a lot of sense. You know?
Yeah. And I could mention also the Zero Origindia project is run out of the Netherlands, and you can access their lectures. It's Zero Origin India. It's a strangely spelled word, but there were a series of talks on aspects of zero that spread over, I think, maybe 6 months, with different researchers talking about different aspects of zero. And that might also, for some of the audience, be interesting.
They're all available online.
They're
on the
all
website.
yeah.
Can you put that in the chat, actually, for the audience?
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a related question to this actually in the Q&A here, which is it's a really interesting question, which is basically that, so if there was no zero, like no written number zero before that, how would someone express zero? So for example, they say if their food supply runs out of stock, so there's nothing left there, then how would a people, if they were trying to write that down, how might have that been expressed? Is there some other kind of ways that, aside from the numerical zero, that this could possibly be expressed in writing?
That's an interesting question. Well, I think that from what I understand, from the Greeks, they couldn't express zero, or because numerically, because in this philosophical sense, if it's zero, it's nothing, and if it's nothing, it can't be expressed. So I think that so how would they deal with a zero quantity? Any ideas? That's a really, really interesting question, isn't it? I know that the Babylonians, with an incredibly complicated system, mathematical system, left spaces to indicate when they're writing a number, but in terms of expressing a quantity, I don't know.
It's a very interesting question. So
interesting question.
We ask a question live here. Lynn Sock, do you want to join us?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank the speaker for your nice presentation, and thank Dr. Chaka for your good coordination. In fact, I have a few questions. My first question is, do you know some mathematical development on zero that related to the Angkor engineering, or maybe related to modern mathematics? This is my first question, and maybe I would like to see the abbreviation of timeline. Dr. Madam Aczel, can you go to?
Yes, let's see.
The one with
Is it this one?
yeah. I do not really understand. Here there is like I mean the range of I mean so this is the possible discovery of zero or what? I mean Khmer zero is just like here. I mean around 700 here, yeah, between 700 and what about the first? Like Zhu, yeah.
So I think the question is what are some of these other things on the timeline here that relate to the Khmer Zero? So
Okay. So this is really just it's some of the more important mathematical figures, for example, in Zhu in China, and then those are before the Khmer Zero, and then other figures that are mathematically important that come after algebra, tabit. So it was really just an attempt to show where K127 fits in kind of the continuum of mathematical history.
okay, so some of us that are not mathematicians are less familiar with those references there. So
yeah, I think what's important here, before the Khmer Zero was discovered, there was, and definitively dated, because you can't argue with the dating on a stone. There was a feeling that the zero did not originate in India or in an Indianized civilization or in the East, but that it came from the Arab world to the East. So the figures that are on the right side, Tabit, El Jabir, those are Arab mathematicians, and they're later. So what it's really showing is that the zero that was discovered in Cambodia is earlier than was originally thought, and that it had to originate not based on Arab mathematicians, but it predated them.
okay, great. That's very helpful. Thank you. I want to just turn to another question here because our time is running out quickly. So the question is asked whether you came up with, is there any variations on how zero is being expressed within the written records across early civilization, because the idea of the circle being associated with the concept of infinity in some cultures is the opposite and ironic to that it would express nothingness.
It's a really interesting question, and I've heard some different responses to it. I'm not sure definitively whether. I think one of the speculation, it's really a speculation, so it's not backed with solid research, but at a conference I heard one speculation that the reason that the K127 zero is designated as a dot, that's an earlier zero, and that it's possible that it then developed into a zero because a dot is easy to confuse and a zero is more distinct. I'm not sure that that's true, because the zero that's represented immediately afterward, within a year, in Indonesia, it uses a zero. And I've heard some explanations, but I'm not sure that there's any proof.
Okay, thank you. And one more question here on asking about the Sumerian system that uses 60 or 100. They want to know, does that not count as zero?
That's a really interesting question. There have been arguments that yes, they did use a form of zero, and there was a way of I have a reference for that, and I've forgotten what it is, but I'm not sure. I think Amir might talk about it in his book, or else I might be mistaken. But they represented in very long numbers. There was a way of representing a zero with a space. There was also a way in certain contexts that I think, if I'm remembering correctly, were very limited, of using a slanted figure that would represent a zero if it were used in a certain context. But I think generally the research doesn't consider the Sumerian zero, because what we're looking here are how zero was really represented. And I'm not sure that generally researchers consider the Sumerian zero a true zero, but I think it could be argued either way.
And I think we could follow up with a reference.
We could follow up with a reference on that.
Okay, so to follow up on the reference with that, how would
Please feel free to contact us. I think that's and I can put that in the chat.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be
Yeah, and I might say that there are questions that if members of the audience have questions that we can follow up on, we're really happy to do that.
Okay, great. So is there any more questions? And if anyone wants to just, if they don't want to type your question, if you want to just ask it directly, you may do so. We have a couple minutes left. I will just open this up. Okay, so there is the emails and contact information. Maybe you would like to copy and paste that and put that in the chat as well, so people can just copy it themselves and keep it if they would like to do that. Let me ask you in the meantime, do you plan to be back in Cambodia anytime soon? Do you have any?
Yes. Fortunately, as we emerge from the COVID period, we very, very much want to come back to Cambodia. We don't have specific plans, but yes.
Okay, that's good to know. And are you still working with the mathematics department at RUPP?
Interesting that you ask about that. When the book that was translated, Finding Zero, was translated into Khmer by Dr. Solang Uk, with a wonderful introduction from His Excellency Hop Tuat that we're eternally grateful for. And we made the book available in Cambodia for young Cambodians. So as the very limited profits that came through it, we turned over to RUPP, the Royal University of Phnom Penh, with the idea that do something in the mathematics department. So we just yesterday got a really wonderful email that they have produced book, a mathematics book for young students based on a program that has been going on during COVID when there were very limited in-person opportunities. And so a piece of the whatever limited amounts of money they actually could get from this book has gone to partially support this. So this was kind of exciting to see that there's a bit of an outgrowth of something that was started 3 years ago now. So hopefully, we can continue doing something with them.
Great, thank you. I just will throw in Helen's comment here for his people can't see the Q&A, which we can, was back to the Sumerian question on 60 again. She noted that, remember that 60 can also be written as SIXTY. So if you also think about, there's lots of ways to write numbers which are not necessarily numerical digits.
That's a really good point.
Yes, thanks, Helen. And I should note that Tira Toon noted that in his research on Cambodian and Khmer Rouge manuscripts, he has not seen the term year zero. So that's something to note. So we are nearly out of time here. So I wanted to know if whether Miriam, Deborah, Derek, whether any of you have any last words you'd like to say, and then I'll give a little preview of a couple of our upcoming events.
I think, yeah, just to go back to this sort of what we were discussing a little bit about where the oldest zero is and whether this is the Baksali zero or another zero. I think that's what's so exciting about all of this. I think the fact that there are so many different types of representations of zero, and we sort of see this as really a great unifier of it's art, it's culture, it's history, it's math. And I guess just to, reiterate that we're really excited to hear about the research questions that come out of this. We love having these conversations. And I think we're looking forward to continuing this.
Yes, and I would add one comment to that, going back to one of the very first slides that we showed, that is from a newspaper in Brazil showing Amir traipsing through the jungle with Angkor Wat in the background looking for zero. And I think he really loved the image, and he loved to think of mathematics as this fabulous adventure that hopefully people can be inspired by. There are a lot of mysteries out there to discover.
Yeah, that's great. He definitely had, it definitely comes across in the book that he had a very curious mind and a very adventurous spirit. And I think the excitement of the quest for knowledge is, he definitely encapsulates that. And I think that hopefully that spirit of excitement of learning and discovering new things carries forth. And I think there's plenty of work to do, it sounds like, on this zero. Dorit, did you want to say any last?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think we have a good discussion about the zero. So I will discuss with the Cambodian epigrapher who study the Khmer inscription if they can find any other older zero than this, and we will share with you all again. Thank you very much.
Well, that's very exciting. Thank you very much. Thanks to all of you for participating, both audience and panelists. It is a very fascinating discussion, and I look forward to seeing how this develops going forward. So we need to wrap up here, but I just want to share with you all a couple of events that we have coming up at CKS. The next one is an in-person event on October 14th. That's very exciting. It's the film screening of the film The White Building by the director Kavich Niang, who this is a story about the building in Phnom Penh that was torn down in a few years ago, and all the people who had been living there, many of them who were artists, were forced to move out from their home. I've seen the film. I highly recommend it. I had the pleasure of meeting Cavett and some of the film crew before. He will be at the event, and some of the film crew will be there as well. So if you're in Siem Reap, I encourage you to go, and that's at 6 p.m. at the CKS Conference Hall. If you can't see it there, you might be able to see it somewhere else. It did play at it was shown by the MoMA here in New York and the Kennedy Center, and also at a few universities. The next event we have right after that on October 20th is called Mediation and Remediation of Khmer Traditional Wedding Music and Lakan Basak Theater on television and social media. And that is with Dr. Francesca Billeri. And that should be very interesting as well. And that will be shown from, event will take place from 7 to 8:30 p.m. Cambodia time on October 20th. So thank you all for joining us today. Have a lovely weekend, week ahead, I guess. We're not near the weekend yet. And hope to see you next time. Thank you.
See you next
Thank you
time.
so
Thank you,
much.
Thank
everybody.
you so much.